Hey everybody, welcome to LiveCast Conversation with Series. This is episode 20, and as always, I'm your host, Gene Bernier. Today is our first episode of 2021, and I get to have Stephen Pasiciel on our call today. So Stephen is a seasoned human performance coach and a talent and small business executive. Stephen has more than 20 years experience in Canadian and United States in Canada and the United States, which includes director-level roles in for-profit and non-profit organizations, teaching university-level courses in organizational communication, and C-suite positions in SMEs across different industries. His track record includes installing an operating system at a Canadian franchisor, growing a multiple company global technology firm through a focus on talent development and corporate culture, and creating environments for team members to achieve optimal performance in their roles. Steve is also a skilled and experienced facilitator of leadership development programs, communication and teamwork strategies, and emotional intelligence. He recently became a certified EQi-2.0 and EQ360 coach, and is also a certified blind spots coach. He's written and spoken extensively on all these topics. So Stephen, thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Gene, this is awesome, man. That intro was amazing. Now I've got to live into that. I kept hearing you talk, and I'm going, oh shoot, that sounds really better than it actually is. Gene, this is great. I appreciate you inviting me on. I'm really excited about this.
Me too, man. You know, it's a chance to get to have a little bit of one-on-one with you, and then share it with everybody else. The honor is all mine, all mine. So thank you for being on episode 20 as we march towards episode 100. It's one of my personal goals with this show. So,
cool.
So yes, that the intro is impressive, and I know that all comes from all the incredible work you've done and your journey a little bit. I always like to start off with passing it back over to the guests and kind of like sharing us a little bit that journey. Like, that's a lot of things that you've accomplished. So kind of tell us like how you got started with that and like what's the start, and we'll get to where you are right now.
Yeah, it is very eclectic, and I hearing you talk and read that intro / bio, and then even looking back on my career, it has been very eclectic and almost kind of ADD. I've always fancied myself as being entrepreneurial. Maybe to a fault, because there are times when I've just been more focused on what's next than being focused on the here and the now. And so I'll get back to that point a little bit later, but my career basically started in higher education. Both my parents, they're retired now, but they were college professors. And so I was a university rat. Whenever they would go to the campus for an event, I would tag along. And so I grew up in that environment, and talk around the dinner table was on issues in the university and things that they were trying to solve. And so when I graduated from high school, because I was involved in athletics as a high school student, I thought I would be a high school PE teacher. A very noble profession. It was something that I thought fit very well. It was education related because of my folks' example. So I went to school to study education. But because of my playing background, I was a volleyball player growing up. Coaching volleyball was also something that was a great interest to me. And so that was actually my very first career, if you want to call it that. My very first career step was as a university volleyball coach.
Oh, wow.
And so that kind of got me started onto this whole idea of teamwork and team building and strengths and leadership and those types of things is where I first really got the bug for that type of stuff. But then my wife and I had kids, and then I realized that maybe the coaching profession from an athletic perspective wasn't going to be the best way for me to go because of the amount of time that it took, like up at 6 a.m, home at 10 at night because of practices, on the road on the weekends, recruiting and all that type of stuff. And so made the decision to get out of coaching at that point. So probably just I'll fast forward. The first 18 years of my vocational career was in higher education. And simply because, again, that was what I knew. And it was the example of my parents. I did enjoy it. But one of the things that I was learning is because of my entrepreneurial spirit, it was very difficult for me to be patient as things unfolded in that environment. So here's an example. So I'd wake up in the morning, I'd have an idea about something to implement. And then in a higher ed context, the first thing that happens is, well, you got to strike up a committee, and then you have to get all the data together, and then you have to put the data out to people and test it. Yeah. And then finally a decision is made. But sometimes, and I'm not exaggerating, sometimes it could be about 6 months to a year before a decision could be implemented. And as you know, that's a long time. And in that period of time, the environment can completely change, making the context in which the original decision needed to be made kind of irrelevant. So I started to get really antsy, and I wanted to be a faster mover, and I wanted to kind of get things done. And so I jumped into the nonprofit world at first. I did some fundraising for a global education company, and then moved into that franchise company that you mentioned in an operations role. And then now I am working for a tech company in the Fraser Valley in British Columbia in Chilliwack. Kirchhoff Technologies is the parent there. Really, really enjoying my experience there. It's a dynamic group of people. We've had a chance to, as a leadership team, really grow the company over the last 3.5 years or so. But to kind of loop back to the original story, so I'm now in a position where I feel like I can really be a mover and a shaker. And I don't mean that in a sense other than just getting things done. And so that really is kind of a fast forward through my career to date.
Yeah, well, I want to take a little step back at talking about the frustrations from a person who's very entrepreneurial spirit, or very like, here's a problem, let's just solve it and find out if it's actually fixing anything, to go through basically a year's worth of like sitting around, ho-humming around a committee, like that struggle, like that. If you don't mind diving in a little bit about that, like where we're like, I guess we don't need the specifics, but like at what point did you realize I can't take another decision like this? I think that's the question I'm really trying to get to, is like there's a better way.
Yeah, I can't pinpoint one specific example or instance, but I think it was just me coming to the personal realization within myself that there are other things that I could be doing. And what was really important for me, Gene, was to get beyond the impression that it was somebody else's fault, or it was my experience. And I didn't want to run away as opposed to running towards something. So that was a really important growth piece for me, because I would spend so much time in frustration, but I really felt I had to take the step to make sure that I wasn't frustrated with someone else, but that this was just my own issue, and it was an issue of fit, as opposed to being wronged in some way, or doing the old grumbling underneath my breath because so-and-so is dragging this out and stuff. So I really had to, part of my maturation as a professional was getting past that. And then just really looking at myself in the mirror and going, okay, it really is me that's the issue. And so what decision do I need to make to take the next step in my career?
Right. And being able to look at yourself in the mirror and go, what are we going to change? Because at some point, like obviously, if you're championing, be like, we need to make decisions, we need to be able to be moved, we need to be nimble. You look at yourself and you take that real kind of step back, go, okay, I don't like where I'm at. So what do I change? How do I show up just a little bit different tomorrow to know that I'm starting to move the right way? Now, when you came to that realization, was it big changes, or did you start like implementing a bunch of small things to see how they were going to shake out for you?
Oh, I love that question. You know what? For me, it really was getting to a point. First of all, it was a very big change. It was a big change in my mindset in this way. If you would talk to myself maybe 10 or 15 years ago, you would probably have heard me say something like this: 10 or 15 years from now, I'm going to be doing this. I had it all mapped out. I had it all planned out, and I knew, 5 years I'm going to be doing this. After that, this is the next step. And it was a list that I was going to check off. And it was very motivating for me at the time. But looking back in hindsight, it was almost the death of me, because it was so forward thinking that I forgot about living in the present and looking at the day and wondering what opportunities I can take advantage of in the moment.
Right.
And so for me, it was a huge internal paradigm shift to get to the place where, okay, if I want to keep making a move or a shift, it had to be for the right reasons. And what I mentioned before, I had to be moving towards something because it was a good fit, or because the circumstance was right, as opposed to getting frustrated by something, running away from that because I didn't like the feeling of being frustrated.
Yeah.
Those were two totally different things. And so that paradigm needed to shift for me.
Right. And there's two things I want to talk about, like running away with your frustration, because it's like, oh, you're just picking up your baggage and taking it with you to the next part. But as well, I just totally lost the train of thought. Talking about you had your 10 to 15 year plan. And as you're saying that, a quote, I think it's Mike Tyson, says, everybody's got a plan until they're punched in the face, right? Like it's always interesting to, a lot of people want to plan like 10 to 15 years out, or like when you're in an interview. I haven't been in one of those in a while, but I'm grateful to be my own boss. But like when people ask, well, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? Like, what a horrible question, honestly, because you don't know. And like one of the things you talked about here is like, that was almost to a detriment, going, here it is, here's this plan. And then what happens when you don't hit it at those exact moments? Instead of like, looking, be like, here's where I aspire to be. Here's what it should feel like. Here's what it should look like. Slice off the time component. Now maybe it's a little bit better, but with that time component, I always find people that have those plans to that level of detail, when they don't hit the dates exactly, it's really detrimental and takes a lot of wind out of their sails.
You're exactly right. And it's almost like you start to live in this perpetual state of fear and anxiety and just disappointment.
Yeah.
Because you're right. You have these goals, but you never hit them. Or you realize halfway through or halfway to the goal that you might not hit it. So then you adjust. So then you're constantly shifting your goals, which is in itself madness and insanity, because then you're never accomplishing anything.
Yeah.
It was a huge aha moment for me.
Yeah. And as well, like understanding, like being able to step back and go, okay, great. I'm really happy and excited for future Steve. Present me has to be like actually okay, because if I'm not, we'll talk about the baggage component in a moment, but like we bring that same step forward, be like, are you really moving, or are you stuck on a treadmill just kind of like running in the same spot going, I can run really fast, but I'm not going anywhere, and I'm really disappointed. And then you're just stuck in this, like, you're just viewing the future, trying to view the future, trying to grab it, and it's just out of reach, and you're not making any progress. You're just making a whole lot of movement.
That, and what I also found myself doing, and again, this hearing myself say this out loud just kind of makes me want to bang my head against my desk, is looking back in hindsight about all the opportunities that I might have missed.
Oh yeah.
By skipping the present and looking too far into the future. And what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about like business opportunities. I'm talking about people opportunities, because you and I are both such people, and we kind of get our energy from interactions like this. how many of these types of interactions did I miss because I was too focused on something else way off in the distance and I missed it. So that's kind of, you mentioned the word baggage. I mean, that's probably something that I still carry, wondering in hindsight what was missed in my forward thinking mentality at the time.
Oh, 100%. Like, as soon as you pull yourself out of that present, like you miss everything around you, right? All you know, you're a father and a husband. Be like, even just at that level, what did you miss? Because you were too busy like chasing something instead of going, all right, here's where I'm going. I'm doing this for right now, my part of my day, but as well, you're also important in part of my day, and just being here and present. Because, well, watching little ones grow is just like one moment they're 2 and 3, next moment you've got 21 and 19-year-olds. Like that disappears like that. You're like, whoa, what just happened? I have adult children.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then you also raised a really good point. What was there an actual specific moment, I think was your question, that kind of shifted that? I kind of talked in generalities about that, but I do remember a very specific time, Gene, when I was in an interview actually. And it really wasn't an interview in the formal sense of the word, like suit and tie, but it was with a buddy of mine who works at a large company, and there was a position available. And because he and I were friends, he invited me into his office and we had basically an informal conversation. And one of the things, he looked me right in the eye because we were good friends and there was trust there. He looked me right in the eye and he said, Steve, when are you going to stop jumping from thing to thing? Like when are you going to be able to just kind of rest and settle and dig your teeth into something, fight through the ambiguity, fight through the frustration, and just like be? He didn't use those specific words, but the message was very clear. And so it was at that point that I kind of sat down and was like, oh, you know, other people have shared those types of things with me before, but that was the first time. Maybe I wasn't ready to hear it, but that was the first time that it was very, very real. And so it was at that point in time that I considered the paradigm shifted and really just put my blinders on and put my nose down and my eyes down and just focused on the here and now.
Yeah. It's be where your feet are at, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did that, making that shift, like the way you describe it, it feels like it was just like, it hit you like a ton of bricks and it's just like, and now we've shifted. And was it like the way that it sounds like, just kind of in a blink of an eye, you're like, oh, the old me's gone and this is the new me. I guess I better get used to this.
You know what? It was, and I'm not oversimplifying it, Gene. It really was that abrupt, because I was in a career. I had healthy relationships. Like nothing was broken, but it was more of just like put the brakes on, look around you, realize what you have, and just be present and just live in it. And so I didn't really have to change too much in terms of what I was doing, but what needed to change was my mindset. And so that's why I felt it was very abrupt. Yeah.
I asked that question because I think there's a lot of people that think, oh, those type of things happen over time. Be like, maybe all the build up to allow you to be open to that message was, but when you hear it, it is a switch gets hit and you're like, oh yeah, no more.
Yeah. Cause you can either, to use your, like the switch gets flipped and you can either buy into it or not. I mean, it's a choice at that point. And so that's why it was as abrupt as it was, because I just made the choice, you know what, and enough.
Yeah.
Like it's time to be present.
So is that, from that conversation, was that the thing that led you into the nonprofit world and everything else? Or at what point in your career was that switch hit?
Yeah, you know what, it was after that. And it was in fact after that time that I spent at that franchisor. So it's actually probably been in the last, I want to say 4 years, Gene.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible. But just to be able to know, you seem so solid. I don't know if that's even the right word, or if that makes sense, but like you just seem very centered and very here to be able to hear back that journey's only been 4 years going with you. And what's that journey been like in those 4 years compared to the 15 leading up to it? for your own like development, and I'm asking it around like, do you find where you're at now, this is accelerating actually where you want to take, a future version of yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I don't know about you, but I always find that I can look back at previous events in my life, and I can make chicken salad out of you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I can weave a great narrative out of past events because I can just manipulate them and make it sound like really, really good.
So you're a good storyteller.
Yeah, right. So, but I do like I there's not a lot I would change because the things that I've experienced along the way, they have led to who I am today. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't go back and say, well, that was useless, or I could just crumple that up and throw that out. No, it's part of who I am. Yeah. It's part of my journey. It's part of my story, and it adds up to who I am today. And so I wouldn't change anything. Because there are a number of just eclectic things that I've done that have allowed me to have the breadth of experience. Whereas if I would have stuck with one thing, that might have been a good move in terms of my psyche and just my own kind of philosophical self-awareness paradigm. But like my family and I, we've moved around a lot, which has been stressful and tiring on one hand, but it's been very invigorating and new and exciting on the other hand. I've done a lot of different jobs in a number of different industries, which I think has set me up well for a future career in coaching and helping businesses of any kind, which is what I'm passionate about. I think the journey, because I feel more settled in who I am and my own self-awareness now, it's easier for me to look back and go, yeah, that was meaningful. Whereas maybe 4.5 years ago, because I was not yet in this settled place that I am now, if you would have asked me that same question then, I probably would have had a very different answer because I had not yet come to terms with the shift, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100% makes sense. Yeah. That's awesome. So with that, back to the question at hand, do you feel like now that you're actually more present and almost like slowing down in the moment, do you feel like it's moving you faster?
Yeah, I love it. I love it, Gene. That's exactly what it is, because not only is it like a mental and philosophical paradigm shift, but now what I'm focused on is what is it that I'm just truly passionate about, and do that. And rather than saying, "Ooh, that looks like it could be fun, I'm going to go try that," and then, "Ooh, the whack-a-mole, the whack-a-mole toy at the fair. Oh, that looks like fun, so I'm going to go and try that for a little while, and then when I get bored, I'll move on to the next different thing."
Right.
So it's really, okay, let's just take a breath, Steve, and look in the mirror and go, okay, what is it that makes you tick? So in the last 4.5 years, it's been questions like that about self-awareness, about emotional intelligence, about passion, about identity, and those types of things, which has really helped me just kind of be settled more. Because when someone says, "Hey, what is it that you do?" it's no longer I give them the answer of where I work. Like I don't talk about that anymore. I talk about what I'm passionate about. I talk about the impact that I feel I want to have in people's lives. So that's been another shift as well.
All right, we'll put you a little bit on the spot. So what is that message about? What are you passionate about? What are you bringing forth? How are you serving people now?
Oh man, again, it's a beautiful question, Gene. And the reason I sigh and hesitate just a little bit is because I know intuitively what that is, but the challenge for me has been to articulate that in a way that makes sense for people, because there is so much. And then to kind of whittle that down into a very nice, succinct statement has been difficult for me. And so I tend to talk about it in two different ways. The first thing with individuals, it's about self-awareness, like I've mentioned before. The main problems that I see, and it was a problem that I had to wrestle through myself, and so this is why I'm so passionate about it, is because people who make decisions and act, but they do so kind of outside of an understanding of who they really are. And so when they do that, what they inadvertently do is they make poor decisions, or they communicate poorly, or there's misalignment. And so I'm really passionate about helping people just understand who they are and get them to a place of self-awareness. Now, I know that sounds like really philosophical and kind of very general, but I mean, it's like, that's kind of where I want to sit with people. But then the other thing on the organizational level, because I have grown up in my career in organizations, I do feel a passion to continue to invest in companies and the growth of businesses as it relates to people and teams. And so the other thing I'm passionate about is helping companies develop leadership development cultures, because one of the problems that I've seen over the years is that senior leaders in companies, they don't have a good way to identify and groom and prepare and support future leaders.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge problem, because, as you know, Gene, often what they have to do is they have to hire from outside. Not that that's a bad thing, but it can be a very dangerous thing, because there's culture issues, there's kind of insider outsider issues. And so I really feel passionate about helping companies develop this leadership development culture, so where they're growing their leaders from within,
right,
and helping them really understand how to identify people that have potential, and then train them and prepare them for those higher leadership roles. So that in a nutshell is kind of where I'm spending my mental energy right now. And you know what? More than mental energy, really my heart energy as well, because I really do feel that's kind of it, because it's kind of who I am and how I'm wired to help. And I feel really jazzed and energized in those two areas.
Right. Well, as you're talking about it, like, your eyes start to light up, and you can tell that this is what actually sparks you joy, right? Like, it's you're doing it, and it's probably so easy to like get pulled into it now, instead of having like push yourself like probably some of the other work was. Now, I will say one thing about, you started off going, oh, it's really hard to like describe what I'm doing, and then you describe it perfectly. So like, maybe when afterwards you go back, listen to this, and just like see how easily that just fell out, right? And that's the beauty of it. Like, I can recognize really well, I think we have a lot more in common than we think, because like, I still struggle with like that same feeling of like, how do I take this picture that's in my mind and then like put it to words, and then spit those words out in an intelligent way. Yeah. And as you're talking, like, yes, I understand it. And then all of a sudden they just like spewed right out of you. I'm like, I think he's got it a little bit more dialed in than he gives himself credit for.
Well, thanks for leading me there, Gene. And I think it's too, because, and tell me if this is your experience, because there are so many things going on in the brain. Like, there's so many ideas and different ways of living life and stuff. But so to take all of that and then narrow it into focus is a challenge.
Oh, big time. Because there's in this line of work, there's so much to do. And you know what the beauty is? You'll never be out of work. Right. People constantly need to be developed, right? So like, you have like this wonderful opportunity sitting in front of you, and you finally like been able to unlock it and go, holy crap, I can do this. I'm doing this, right? And every time that you say that and step into it more, the more you're like, yeah, right? Like, that's it comes out more, and you're excited about it. You just want to help affect more people. Like, I when you start talking about, I jump around a lot, so
cool.
So you're talking about like leadership development from within. I think that's really an interesting thing, because like, a few things jump to my mind is like, you talk about like these higher ups, and depending on like, some small companies maybe only have one, and that CEO or the two founders are sitting at the top going, why can't anybody else do it to the level that we are? Be like, you haven't trained them. And as well, they don't have the same skin in the game. Like, then it's I look at that as going, do we have boss culture or leadership culture? And I think they're two wildly different things. Neither are, if they're done properly, neither are bad, but you get different results. Like, if your goal as an organization is to groom everybody up and to make your own leaders, you show up differently, versus we're here to get shit done, snap the whip, and, oh, you're the best at doing X, Y, and Z. Cool. You're now the boss of all the people that do X, Y, and Z. Be like, I don't even know how to do. I'm really good at my old job. I'm not really good at dealing with people. Like it's always an interesting situation watching some people get promoted when they're in totally the wrong spot, right? Like it's sometimes not your A players that are sitting doing that work that should actually be leveled up to being the leaders. Now,
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, I'm 100% on board with you, and I tie that back to the self-awareness piece that I talked about earlier. Is I think one of the reasons that let's just call them senior leaders, or you used a great word, founders,
Yeah.
and CEOs of a company, it's hard for them to develop, well, first identify and develop future leaders because they don't really know themselves that well. Yeah. And it's not their fault. But because what they've done since they founded and started their companies, they've done everything. And so in their own minds, they're good at everything. And so, like you said, Gene, it's like, oh, why can't anybody else do this as good as I can?
Yeah.
And so that self-awareness piece comes in to be able to say to a founder CEO, okay, let's really determine where your value is. Like, are you in the right seat?
Yeah.
Just because you founded the company, does that mean that you are actually good in that chair?
Yeah.
So it's really that self-awareness piece comes in to say, okay, let's identify who you are before you can actually identify who someone else is and then bring them along. Because if you want to hang on to this piece of the company, because we have identified together that, yeah, that's a really good fit for you, then let's find people who you need to groom into roles that you're not so good at. So that's kind of how I tie that all together.
Oh, I love that you talked about how not all founders are meant to be the CEOs. It is like, and I've talked about that before. Like, yes, at the start you wear all the hats and you're doing all the craziness, and you get rewarded as a founder through being, you own the company or you have a massive stake in the company. So you get rewarded on the profit side through that, or maybe eventually being bought. Not all service companies get bought, and not all product companies are bought either, but like you should be rewarded for, that ownership stake is a much different stake than the CEO, COO, or any of those other roles. It's just another role. And I think so many times people confuse those two things, be like, well, I own the majority, so I should be I'm also the CEO. Be like, are you holding us back by being the CEO? Are you aware enough to know that you're holding us back? And do you know what you actually need to be the best CEO for this company, for this culture? And is this the culture that you want? And you start to peel, not to steal my own name, but they start peeling those layers back. But are they willing to get that exposed?
Yeah. I'm thinking back to, I don't think it was an email exchange that we had, Gene. I think it was just in WhatsApp. And I mentioned something that you responded to. And because you responded to it, it stuck with me. And I think I made the comment that I've identified what it is that I really should care about. And that's a really important phrase for me, because being passionate about something or being good at something, I wonder if those two things are different than caring about something.
Ooh.
Because I'm just thinking to some of the CEOs that I've worked with are brilliant, brilliant people. But because of the stage in the company that they're at, they care about everything.
Yeah.
Which they probably should. Everybody should care about everything, but not everybody can act on everything that they care about. No. And so the key piece there for me that I'm wrestling through right now in my own life is identifying, in addition to what it is that I'm passionate about, what are the things that I should be caring about?
Right.
Because I am really, this is a really lame example, so I apologize right off the bat, but I'm passionate about football.
Yeah.
But I probably shouldn't care about it because I'm not very good at it. It's crazy example. I know it falls really flat, but that's kind of where my thinking is taking me right now.
It's interesting. I was going to use a very similar example around like sports, like you can be passionate about it. And I think there's like maybe caring, being good at it, and being passionate are maybe three different like pieces of or a metric, or be like, you can be super passionate about something, but not good at it.
Right.
And you might also need to care like quite a lot about, because it's important to what you're doing in your day to day. Or maybe you're really low on the passionate side, but really good at it, and you're like moderately need to care about like all those, like basically it's trying to be like, I'm seeing this as like an old RPG game, but like you're trying to build up your character. So like, what stats are actually going to be the important ones, and what stats rollouts do you need to fulfill the hat that you're wearing? Yeah. And you're wearing different hats at all different times, especially as just as a human period. Like I look down, like I've been working on my own like little goals sheet, right? And that's split up into like there's 8 sections of that. And each one of those, you have a different, that's just being me. That's not even talking about like being a CTO for Canadian Men's Health Foundation, or being a coach or anything else. Like those are like, and then the hats just start to devolve from there. So like understanding your stat loadout for each one of those hats, and then building the harmony to make sure that you're taking them on and off at an appropriate time. Because you shouldn't be wearing one all the time, or you're going to look like us, and we're, with sans hair now.
Sans hair, exactly. And the other thing, this goes back to the self-awareness discussion, is being really honest with oneself. I think is huge, because, and I'll tell you a story about where that fell flat for me. It was probably about, I'm going to say 10, 12 years ago. A supervisor in the university that I worked for came up to me with an opportunity. And because I was so like, hey, this might be a good stepping stone to the next thing, and that was my mindset at the time, my first response was, yes, I'll take it, which I did. But because I was so lacking in self-awareness, and I wasn't yet being able to be honest with myself about where I was and who I was becoming, skill set, mindset, all of those types of things, I dove into this role, and it was horrible. It was basically, it was a data entry role. And it literally, the role forced me to be at a desk behind a computer screen, literally crunching numbers.
Yeah.
And as you get to know me, Gene, you will know that is like the opposite of who I am.
Where you want to be, yeah.
Like I'm not even like I barely graduated from high school because of my math scores. Like I did statistics at graduate level, but that was only because I was a little bit more mature in that, and I had the gumption to just get through it. But you put a spreadsheet in front of me, like that is so far out of my comfort zone and my desire of where I want to be. And so, but I entered into that role because I jumped in, right, and I wasn't honest with myself about, okay, is this really something that I want to do? Well, yeah, it was something I wanted to do, but is this really a good fit?
Right.
Like those weren't questions I was asking enough back then, because it was always about the next thing. And so, because I was so unaware of myself, I made decisions with really, really bad metrics, and it got me into trouble.
Yeah. So how long did it take for you to realize you're like, oh, I made a mistake?
Oh, probably. I would say probably within 2 months.
Yeah.
And there was a people component to it, because there was a research part, and I had to interview, and so I got my people fix. But at the end of the day, the reporting and the structuring the data and all that type of stuff, like it was literally, you could hear the sucking noise in my office as the life was being drawn out. Like, yeah, it was crazy.
How long did you stay in that role?
3 years.
Wow.
Yep.
That's a long time to feel like that.
Yeah. And there were some other things going on too that made it like, okay.
Yeah.
And I worked with great people. But the role was just like, it was life sucking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, there's somebody out there that would have loved to do that role.
Exactly.
That would be so excited about it. And you look at it going, shit, maybe I was I the asshole that like ruined that opportunity for somebody else?
Thank you very much for that, Gene. Now you make me feel so guilty that someone out there was waiting for that opportunity.
Well, if that's the one thing we can like, that the big gem we can share is like, if you're in that wrong seat and you know it, like to take that, like to add that self-awareness component to it, be like, all right, I don't like this. Is it a possibility that somebody else like thrives doing this? Should I just like shut up and like keep doing this horrible thing? Or should I go figure out what it is? Is there a role within what I'm doing right now with the people that I am that I thrive at, so I can be really good? So somebody who can be like phenomenal here can knock this out of the park, and we can actually get more value out of it.
I love it. And you know what else I think about, Gene, related to that story is not only was it an issue of me looking in the mirror and going, is this really what I want to be doing? Or is this really a good fit? And does this role really match how I'm wired? I think back in hindsight about the guy who came to me and said this, literally, and I quote, "Hey, Steve, I think you'd be really good at this." Like, what's up with that? Like, and so when I am now in a position to go to someone and say something like, "Hey, I think you'd be really good at this," it makes me stop and really mean it if I'm going to say something like that to someone. And I better make sure that I'm actually putting that person in a position to succeed, as opposed to just saying that to make that person feel good about him or herself because, oh, I have this position I need to fill. And so, hey, I think you'd be really good at this. Is that really the case? Yeah. So that's what I think about too.
Yeah. And to what end are you trying to live that to, right? Like, I like the fact that you talked about, is this in their best interest? And it's like, are you giving them a compliment or a conscious compliment, right? Like, be like, you look great. Be like, or I love how your smile is. It really just beams and it brings out your eyes. It's incredible. It really makes me smile, right? Like there's a very big difference between those both compliments, but one's very superficial and the other's like, here's why I think all this is a bag of chips, right? Like that's important to be able to bring to. And then maybe part of that self-awareness as well is like, for anybody watching in the future, if somebody's like, I think you'd be great, be like, that's awesome, thanks. What makes you, what makes you think that'd be a really good fit for that? I'd love to hear more. Like, don't just take it at the surface. Like get 5 levels deep. Is like, keep asking why until you can't ask why anymore. Even though I hate asking why because it's very defensive. Why makes people defensive sometimes, but it stands for the layering. But
yeah, for sure. Great point.
Yeah. Well, man, as I said, like these things blow by. We're already at 43 minutes. Like,
holy smokes.
This just all of a sudden just goes places. So I want to talk, if you still got a little bit of time, I'd love to hear more about like where you're taking, because you've just finished some coaching certification, and like how's that shaping where your feet are taking you next?
So I thought long and hard, Gene, about what certification to get. I knew I wanted to get some advanced training. And my research at first led me to the leadership coach certification, the one that you can just go online. A number of different institutions offer it. But because, and I hope that in our conversation today, what's been drawn out is my passion around people and self-awareness, emotion, and digging down below what is seen to get to what is unseen, to look at motives and things like that. And so this idea of emotional intelligence, although I never used it in my daily language, is in hindsight something I've been very passionate about, because again, as you and I get to know one another, what you'll find is that I get a lot of fulfillment, and I look back and call something successful if there was deep emotional connection. We can achieve a goal and we can meet a milestone, but if there's not emotional connection, it's not I haven't maximized the opportunity.
Right.
So when I did more research into the EQi, It was a great fit for me because that's where I live anyway, is through these layers of emotion. And so I wanted to be able to provide other people with coaching in that area to help them become more self-aware so they can be more effective and do more meaningful work.
Yeah.
And then about the blind spots journey, because you and I are both taking that at the same time. And I like the whole idea of blind spots because it's another layer of self-awareness, to be able to start conversations with people around, do you really know yourself?
Yeah.
And do you really know others? And what could be getting in the way of you living a life or doing work of meaning? And so those two things, plus my preparation and education and all the stuff that I've done, I think really set me up well. I'm biased toward myself. They really set me up well to kind of just start digging into people's lives and to be able to help them become more aware so that they can in turn help other people become more aware as well. And like I said before, live and work lives of meaning. And so I really am passionate about this idea of coaching. And I'm really passionate about the two things that I mentioned before, Gene, the self-awareness and then the leadership development piece. And what my goal in the immediate and even in my current role is to, in the organization that I serve right now, is creating that leadership development culture where it's not just one or two or three people at the top who are leading the organization, but where what we're doing is we're raising a new generation of leaders so that they in turn can do the same for future generations. And so I get really fired up about that. And then I also just love sitting with people. And I love being in conversation, and I love being in process with people. And so I look forward to doing those types of things, but definitely in a coaching role. And so I've worn a lot of hats in terms of titles, but I'm really trying to develop this brand and idea around coaching. And so I'm going to go for it. Nice. I feel centered on it though, Gene, because I feel it is a here and now thing. As opposed to, a way off in the future thing. And so, that's kind of where I'm at.
That's exciting, man. I'm really excited to see where this journey takes you over this next year and all the ways that you're going to continue to grow. And I think it's, Kirchhoff's very lucky to have somebody that's there to help teach and learn how to build more leaders. Like, what a lucky organization, what a lucky group of people to be able to have that kind of alignment, obviously, throughout. Is like everyone there should be a leader in some shape or form, and being able to bring that out is awesome.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's encouraging. Thank you.
Well, we are past our time limit. So I've got the one question is what would you do, or what piece of advice would you give yourself if you could go back in time 10 years? And is even 10 years enough?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is enough. And I think, and this might not be a surprise, but the piece of advice would be to slow down, live in the present, and look for opportunities to build into people now. Yeah. Yes, there's validity in planning and goal setting and all that. Those are very worthwhile activities, but live in the present and don't miss what's going on today. That would be the main message.
I think that's a great message to have for anybody that's listening right now, is be here and be open. That's it. Well, Steve, thank you so much for being on episode 20. This has been a blast. I can't believe we've almost had an hour fly by. I can't believe that. Yeah, and I suspect it's going to be the first of many hour conversations, if not more.
Gene, I appreciate the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for your great questions and teasing some of that good stuff out of me. But look forward to doing this again, or if not this, then having another conversation.
Oh, I suspect we'll do another one of these for sure. I'm looking forward to bringing some more of the guests back and experimenting with some other ways of having these conversations, right? That's why I've called it a conversation with. It's meant to be a conversation. It's meant to see where it's going to go to. So with that, everybody, thank you so much for watching the Pealed Back's LiveCast Conversation With. This has been episode 20. I'm Gene, and until next time, we'll see you next Wednesday. All right.